Hi everybody, Joe Conkley in the shop. Today, in our ongoing series about guitar geometry, we're going to talk about fretboards, how to measure the scale length and the radius of a fretboard and how those things affect the playability and just some sort of historical precedents on those sort of things. And I've got a number of fretboards from our fretboard collection here just to give you an idea what things look like when they're off the guitar. This, of course, is an ebony fretboard blank. It's all squared up to start the process of cutting the slots. And there can be slots of a variety of widths for different purposes and different fret wire. But of course, fret wire is a different installment, so we're not going to get too deep into that. But anyhow, there's some different fretboards. Let's start off with this lovely guitar here. This is a Martin 00018. And I also have another Martin guitar here to contrast it with. This is a Martin OM 28. So the model numbers, 000 and OM, they have the same body style, the same body shape, same body size. And the main differences between the two models are in the scale length and the nut width and string spacing, which we talked about last week. So on a 000 guitar, it has the classic Martin short scale, which is designated as 24 3/4 of an inch. Let's take and measure the scale length here and see what we get. I have a nice who makes this ruler? It is I thought it was a Starrett roller. I believe it is from the Starrett company, but it's 36-inch long, and I have a number of scales here. And the scale that I'm going to use is in the 100th, so I can get quite precise with these if I can see the little notches, but it allows me to measure quite precisely, and it's plenty long to handle any length of standard guitar up to a standard bass guitar also. This is usually the way I would measure the scale length. Lay the rule on the fretboard and butt it right up against the nut here, so you have your 0 point right at the end of the nut and fingerboard, and I would measure to the middle of the 12th fret and double that, and that would be the actual scale length. So let's see what we get there. Let me get my handy dandy calculator out here, but get my nose right down here and see what I got. So when I look at this, it is 12.41 inches to the middle of that 12th fret. 12.41 times 2 equals 24.82. Now let's also measure to the end, to the saddle, because in one manner of speaking, the scale length is thought of as a designation for the ringing string length, but in actuality, the scale length is the middle of the 12th fret doubled. That's how the fretboard is laid out, and then the saddle is actually placed a little bit longer than that to compensate for the fact that the string sits up above the fretboard just a little bit. There's some space between the string and the fretboard, because if you had it sitting right down on the fretboard, you wouldn't be able to hear anything. It would be buzzing and clattering all over the place. So whenever you play a note with the string sitting just above the fretboard and you press it down, you actually stretch that string and pull it a little bit sharp, very much like you would when you bend a note. So when I grab that note and bend it, I'm pulling it sharp, and you get that same effect when you press a string down to the fret. It's quite a bit less, but you still get that same effect. So that the saddle is placed from that scale length just a little bit longer. So the scale length on this guitar is 24.82, and the saddle position, if I read from the middle of the saddle where this string is ringing, is 24.92. So there's approximately 1/10 of an inch compensation. let's look at that saddle. It's not straight across. It's not that same compensation straight across. The saddle is tilted or longer, further away. That length, that ringing string length, is a little bit longer here on the bass side. So we're compensating for how the fact that the strings are sitting above the fretboard a little bit, and we're also compensating for the fact that each string gets larger as we go across. The larger the string is, the longer, the more compensation it needs, so that things will play in tune all the way up the fretboard. So there you go, 24.82 scale on the triple O. Let's take a look at the OM. This is the tricky part where I got to juggle guitars. I had a space for every guitar, but I guess I need two spaces. Let's take these fingerboards and move them out the way. Here we go. Space. Shuffle the triple O up here. All right. The OM is thought of as the standard Martin log scale, usually thought of as 25.4 inches. So let's put that up here. It's interesting to note when you look at the saddle position, it is right there at 25.4. That's why that's why a Martin log scale is usually described as 25.4. That is not actually the scale length of a Martin. That is the scale length plus the compensation for the high E string. It's a little bit longer on the low E string. So let's measure from the nut to the middle of the 12th fret on this guitar. And it is 24.67. So I'm going to go to my calculator here. 24.67 times 2 equals, oops, I didn't get that. It's 12.67. I'm sorry. I did say 12.67 times 2 is 25.34. So that saddle is compensated 6/10 of an inch, a little bit. So there's that 6/10 of an inch. So compensation factor can vary from guitar to guitar depending on the size of the string and any number, and the action and any number of other factors. But so 25.34 is what I would think of as the actual long scale length in a Martin guitar. Most of the time you'll find that 25.4 right at the high E string. So the difference there is about 3/4 of an inch, from 25 3/4 to 25.4, somewhere in there. And it's not a huge amount of a difference, but it can make a lot of difference in the feel of the guitar. The longer the scale length, all other things being equal, the longer the scale length, the more power and tension the string has and feels. So an OM with a 25.4 or 25.34 scale length imparts a little bit more power to the guitar, so that it could affect the volume and also what I would call the headroom. If the string, it also definitely affects the feel of the string to your left hand. The longer scale is going to feel a little bit stiffer, all other things being equal. So in my mind, that allows you to dig in a little bit more with your right hand, give the guitar a little bit of higher headroom so you can dig in and play it a little bit louder, and the guitar will still give you back what you're putting into it energy-wise. So a OM is thought of having a little bit more power. I would say it definitely lends itself to the low end of the guitar a little bit more. The triple O is probably something that's a little more balanced, a little sweeter. So there's a couple of classic scale lengths in the Martin situation. Let's also take a look at another measurement, standard measurement of a fingerboard, which is the radius in the fingerboard. Take a look at a couple of these fingerboards here. Our fingerboard blank is flat. both sides are flat, but this already radius fingerboard has a slight curve to the top here, and we can see that pretty readily like this. Here's the flat one. The flat ruler lies on there pretty evenly. On the radius one, you can see space in there, it'll rock. These tools right here, these radius gauges, which we purchased from the Stuart McDonald Company, allow us to measure some standard gauges. There's 2 of them here in each set. This one has the smaller ones on it from 9.5 inches, 7.25 inches, 9.5, 10 inch, and 12 inch. And what that is, if we took and drew a circle with a radius, which is from the center to the outside edge of 12 inches, drew that circle, and then we take this portion, which is, how wide is that? 3.5 inches. That's the curve you would get. And so that's what each one of these curves is based on. The radius of a circle with that 3.5 inch section. And the other one is a little bit flatter. It has the standard radius is on it for the from 14 inches, 14, 15, 16, and 20. So there are those. And so let's take this radius gauge and see what we get here on this fingerboard. I'm going to get a light in here so we can get it backlit. My first guess is this was a Martin-esque fingerboard, and I know that the Martin usually has a 16-inch radius. So when I lay that on there, what do I see? It's a little bit, it's slightly more arched than 16 inches. I can see light in the middle of that gauge there. So these 2 edges are touching, but the middle isn't. So I need one. Let's try the 14. Let's see what we got. No, actually, it's the other way around, huh? There we go. Yep. So it was 16. I can see light in the middle. 20. It's actually the opposite. I have that balanced in the middle where it's a little more arched than 20. So it's right in between 16 and 20, this fingerboard. So I would guess it to be around 18. Another a good way to measure fingerboard radius is with these notched radius gauge. They have notches for 6 strings, so you can do this on a guitar that is strung up. So I'm guessing that we're going to be pretty similar here. So you just lay it on the fingerboard so you can get in between the strings, and it's good to get some light in there so you can see what's going on. Yep, that is around a 16-inch radius right there. I don't know if you can see that now. 16-inch radius. Let's look down here. It's pretty consistent to the end of the neck, although there we go. The 16-inch radius. That looks pretty good. So this OM has a 16-inch radius, which is a pretty standard Martin radius. The radius on the fingerboard allows for some more comfort in playing chords, like specifically bar chords, where you have to use your first finger to bar across the whole thing. It just allows it allows a little more comfort and ability to get that bar chord nice and solid. It also makes it so when you're playing chords where you're playing strings where you have a fretted note right beside 2 open notes, it allows you to get your finger in there and to get those chords a little more solidly and easily. That's a pretty standard thing for a lot of flat tops. The 24 3/4 inch scale, the 25.4, or actually no, I'm sorry, I'm calling it the 24 3/4 inch scale. The short Martin scale is designated as 24.9. I'm thinking of the standard Gibson flat top, the Gibson scale, like 24 3/4. Let's take the triple O and measure this again, because it should. Yep, there we go. the 24.9 scale. This has the the saddle position right at 24.9, and as I measured before, is 24.84 plus 0.6 of an inch compensation, which is very consistent between these two new Martin guitars. Let's take a look at some electric guitars. And there are what I would consider to be three classic electric guitar scale lengths. First one we're going to measure here is off this Les Paul Classic. Let's do that same thing here. We're going to butt it up against the nut, measure it to the middle of the 12th fret, and also take a look where the high E string sits. So let's see. The middle of the 12th fret is 12.29 approximately. Times 2 is 24.58. And the high E string position is at 12.63. So there you go. This isn't that correct, Steve? A Les Paul, standard Les Paul scale length is thought to be, 24 3/4. Isn't that good? So it's not exactly that. It's not 24.75. The actual scale length measured from the front of the nut to the middle of the 12th fret doubled is a little bit shorter than that. And in this case, there's even the high E string position is a little bit shorter than that. I guess let's try this. Yeah, that might be a little more. In the middle of the fretboard, in between the D and the G strings, if I measure to where those saddles are, it's 24.75. So that is another way that the standard nomenclature of those 12 standard scale lengths might be measured from the nut to the middle of the. So there's some difference between standard measurements and actual, measuring the scale length of the instrument, like how the frets are laid out and that sort of thing. So anyhow, the Les Paul. Let's measure the other end of the. Well, while we're at it, before we move the Les Paul out of its way, what is the radius of this Les Paul? The fingerboard. I was using 12 as my first guess there just to see, but yeah, there's 10. Yeah. It's right there between 10 and 12. Steve, sorry to interrupt and add you in here, but what would you say is the standard radius for a Gibson Les Paul that people think of right off the top? Is it the 12 or the 10? Because I was kind of right in between. I think it's more like a 12.
12 is what I would.
You would have said right off the top of your head, okay. And that's what it looks like closer to me too. Good. Had to check myself here several times. It's the beauty of working in a shop like here, like we have at Elderly Instruments, with a lot of really knowledgeable people right there. So we can consult on different ideas. So here we have a Fender Strat. So when I go to the middle of the 12th fret here, it is 12.73 times 2 is 25.46. And if we do that, middle of the fretboard between the D and the G strings, right there, 25.5, and that is thought of as the standard Fender scale length. So again, we have that same thing where the actual measured scale length from the nut to the middle of the 12th fret double is slightly shorter than the quoted one. So we have 24 3/4 and 25.5. Just the range there, and here we have a really stunning Paul Reed Smith guitar, custom 24 Fire Mist Purple. Paul Reed Smith guitars, one of the things that they did was to take somewhat the best of both worlds between the classic Les Paul and the classic Strat and combine them into one guitar. That's one of the many things it does, because you can see it has the carved arch body like a Les Paul, but the offset upper and lower bow horns like a Strat. Another way that they combine those two is they use a scale length that is in between those two. So if we measure this, we got 25 or 12.47.
Yeah. Well, it's going to
times
be
2,
deeper sounding than the
24.94. So there you go. You have that, and the high E string is really ringing right at that 25-inch, which is what the Paul Reed Smith scale length is usually described as 25 inches. Let's take a look at. We got a 12-inch radius on the Les Paul.
He's not here today. He works on the sales floor.
This looks more like. Yep, this looks more like a 10-inch radius here on the Paul Reed Smith. Let's compare that radius to the Stratocaster here, which you would expect to be have the fretboard curved even more than the 10. Yep. When I put the 10 on there, there's a little space, and let's go to the 9.5, which is the difference is pretty minimal. Yeah, it's closer to the 10 actually. Yep, the 12. So I would call this 10-inch radius on this Strat. So there you go, some classic guitars with standard scale lengths that are known throughout the vintage world, guitar world, but in actuality how the scale length is described is slightly different than the actual measured scale length that the fretboard is laid out on. Another concept as far as fretboard radiuses go, and rather than have the same radius on the fretboard all across the whole length, in one way that a fretboard radius can be cut is when the fingerboard blank is in a rectangle like this. They usually cut. You can cut the fret slots then at that point, and then you can take and radius the fretboard. So you put a consistent radius across this whole rectangular fretboard. But then the fretboard is tapered from end to end, so that the body end of the fretboard is wider, and up near the nut it is narrower. And what that makes this geometry-wise, this tapered, consistently radiused fretboard, it is a section of a cylinder. So that, so it's a cross section of the cylinder, and a cone. What about the cone? The compound radius.
Isn't that what you're talking about?
Yeah. I'm trying to illustrate the difference between a compound radius and a single radius. The single radius has the same radius all the way up and down the fretboard, but a compound radius fretboard has a narrower one at the neck and flattens out as it goes up towards the body. And so that is a section of a cone, correct? Yeah, a section of a cone, cross-section of a cone, as opposed to the single radius fretboard, which is a cross-section of a cylinder. There we go. That's the thing. See, we got some actual geometry into guitar geometry. Yeah, the first conical surface, of course. And the difference that makes a compound radius fretboard is a little more challenging to make, but on a single radius fretboard, the further you go up the neck, well, when you're doing standard bends, all right, here it is first. I'm plugging in the shop here. So when you do a bend, you are taking that string and changing where it sits on the fretboard and moving it over here from here to here, moving it up or down. And the more radius the fretboard is, the smaller that radius and the more curved the fretboard is, it can make for challenges in bending notes. It can, because the frets in the fretboard are leveled in line with the strings, and you change where the string is in line. You've moved it all the way over here, so it can cause some fretting out problems where you get fret buzz. I guess I'm not bending enough. But anyhow, that is one of the reasons you would, one of the pluses of a compound radius fretboard is it allows you to do those fuller bends all the way up the neck without any fretting out. It's a little easier to get the guitar to set up to work in that situation. I think I'm reaching the limit of my guitar geometry and fretboard radius knowledge here. And so, that's all we have for you today in the shop. Appreciate you looking in. Think about this whole series we're doing: neck angles, nut widths, saddle spacing at the bridge, fretboards, scale lengths, radiuses. All these things can give you more information about the guitar that you're looking at and what you like, and help you to shop for the proper guitar for yourself. All right, thanks a lot. Tune in next week and like us and share us on Facebook. See you.